The Bucs have won the division the last 2 seasons under Todd Bowles. However, that was with an 8-9 and a 9-8 record. So are the Bucs anything other than mid? Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome back to the Deep Dive series where we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today, get your cannons out. I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And of course, before we look at 2024, you got to go ahead and reflect at 2023. The Bucs began the season with wins over the Vikings and the Bears. Baker Mayfield played good football, and the defense, they were just absolute savages against the run. Unfortunately, in week 3 against the Eagles, it became very apparent that this team would not be able to consistently run the football. The interior offensive line was absolute rubbish all year long. Tampa won handedly against the Saints 26-9 going into their bye, but they would lose 6 of the next 7 games after. 4 of those 6 losses were by 1 score, which included probably the best game of the entire regular season against the Houston Texans, where Baker seemingly won the game with the touchdown with 46 seconds left for only CJ Stroud to connect with Tank Dell for the game winner. It was utterly heartbreaking. The Bucs were 4-7 and their playoff hopes were faded, but fortunately they play in the NFC South, which means they were still alive. Tampa would go on a 4-game winning streak, and that began with victories over division rival Panthers and Falcons. They didn't particularly have a strong finish to the end of the regular season as they floundered against the Saints, and they did just enough to beat the Panthers, but they won the division at 9-8 and got the Eagles in the wild card round at home. The Eagles, they were trending the wrong direction entering the postseason, and the Bucs ended up beating them 32-9, but they would get bounced the following week in the divisional round against the Detroit Lions 31-23. In terms of efficiency, there was a lot of good and a lot of bad, both offensively and defensively. Baker Mayfield played really good football, which led to the 10th best passing offense, but the guard and center play was atrocious. Rachaad White was given no help in the run game, where the Bucs ranked 29th. And then defensively, they were great at stopping the run, but they gave up some explosive plays in the passing game. Between injuries, bad play, and unwillingness to change schematically, this pass defense let offenses just move down the field on them. They did tighten up once teams got into scoring position, but still, you could tell that this team had quite a few areas to address entering the offseason. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first-time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. This team didn't lose anything to note offensively, but defensively, they did opt not to bring back linebacker Devin White, who ended up going to the Eagles. You had Shaquille Barrett end up going to Miami, but then eventually retiring. And then they decided to trade Carlton Davis to the Lions. Keep in mind, Carlton Davis, this man's either really good or really bad. And you go back to that banger of a game against the Texans, he gave up 3 touchdowns, including the game winner to Tank Dell. So, is it a loss? I don't know, but let's talk about this team's additions. What did they add? How did they get better this offseason? So this offseason, the Bucs had to make a lot of big decisions when it came to who they were going to retain, who they were going to bring back, with probably the biggest decision being Baker Mayfield, who was coming off a really good year with them. Granted, that was under David Canales, who's now the head coach in Carolina, but they bring in Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator. He has a history with Baker Mayfield and Baker's short little stint with the Rams, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the actual coaching staff and what he's going to bring to the table. But ultimately, the Bucs decided to bring Baker Mayfield back. On top of that, they brought back guys like Levante David,
They brought back Mike Evans, being a huge one at wide receiver, low key, one of the best wide receivers in the game that no one really thinks about, just because his numbers are consistent and not always flashy, but he's consistently over 1,000 yards just every year. He's just a hella good wide receiver. But let's talk about the actual additions that this squad made, because some of them were a bit more low key, but I thought they had some solid depth and rotation pieces. For instance, Randy Gregory. With Shaquille Barrett now gone, you look at this pass rush and you're like, this team did blitz a lot last year, and I felt like a lot of that was necessary, was needed, because they weren't necessarily getting great production outside of Barrett. Diaby had a solid year, but still second-year player. How will he do? Joe Tryon kind of been fine, but he hasn't really been more than that. So Randy Gregory kind of gets added to the rotation here, along with, we'll talk about their draft in a little bit, but they also decided to address the edge position there as well. But Gregory, a cheap, solid enough sign in there. I really like this next one in Bryce Hall. He kind of gets overshadowed. He was majorly overshadowed in New York because he was stuck behind guys like Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, so he didn't really get his chance to see a lot of playing time. On top of that, he had a few injuries here and there, but I really liked him coming out of Virginia. I think he's going to be a good fit for this defense, and we did see injuries at the corner position last year for the Bucs. Jameel Dean had a problem staying healthy. It was just one thing after the other, week in, week out with him, unfortunately. And he's one of my favorite corners in the league, so I'm hoping that's not necessarily the case next year with him. But he gives them definitely some solid depth at the corner position. They also bring back Jordan Whitehead, who, basically left for a season and had that banger of a game against the Jets where Josh Allen, I think he was Josh Allen's leading receiver with 3 receptions. He had 3 interceptions that game. But granted, he did give up some stuff in coverage here and there, but the coaching staff is very familiar with Jordan Whitehead. He comes back on a decent contract for a safety, and solid pickup. It's a solid pickup. They also bring in Ben Breedson. I don't love this move. If he's the starter, I don't mind him as a depth player, but there's a shot that he's going to end up being the starter here, and I don't love it. I think it's okay, you kind of struggled on the interior last year. I don't think this move is going to help. We'll see. Again, it's a very low-cost type of move. It really is. 1 year, $3.5 million. Then they also brought in Opeta, who I think can win that left guard job. I really do, over Breedson. I thought he was pretty solid when he had to step up for the Eagles when I think it was the Cam Jurgens got hurt. I always say the Cam Jurgens. The Cam Jurgens. He's that good. But when Jurgens got hurt, he stepped up, and I thought he played relatively solid. So I'm honestly looking for him to compete and potentially win that left guard job. But still, you're probably not feeling great at left guard. You're probably just not. Tavier Thomas is actually a really solid slot player, and this is a team actually with fairly good slot / sub package players. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the draft, but low key, man, he's been pretty good when called upon. I think last year was a bit of a down year for him, but regardless, I thought that was a good pickup in free agency. I talked about Levante David coming back. This guy's consistently a top 5 linebacker, and like Bobby Wagner, he hasn't lost much. I would say David's actually been the better linebacker the last couple of years, just because of what he could do in coverage and what he brings as a blitzer. David's just consistent, man. He's just so good. They bring back Chase Edmonds, whatever. They bring back Greg Gaines, very good depth player and rotation player. Gives you that girth. But let's talk about what they added via the NFL draft. And then they wrapped day 2 up with 2 third-round picks, One being Tyke Smith, another guy who I thought was more of a slot player in the NFL. I thought that's where he was going to be pigeonholed. That or he's going to be a box defender. This guy's at his best when he's about like 8 yards away from the line of scrimmage. He's just really good from that juncture, from that standpoint. And this is a team that feels like they have a lot of, again, nickel and dime type of defenders. So I'm kind of wondering how this will all play out. I'm very intrigued, but he's a good player, and that was probably about the right value for him. And then with their last day 2 pick, they took Jalen McMillan, who it's going to be interesting. He's another guy that I kind of pigeonholed as a slot player, a guy that gives you some vertical ability, but that's also pretty good on the short to intermediate parts of the field. Word is Chris Godwin's going to be playing more in the slot this season. So I'm intrigued. That means Trey Palmer's going to be playing more outside, though you could kick him inside. Like, I don't mind them adding more weapons to the wide receiver core. I think that's A-okay. I think that's fine. I was just a little intrigued with the type of player they got in that room there. But we'll see how this thing breaks down during the season. But in day 3, I liked the Bucky Irvin pick. I really do. They need a little more gusto because really it was just Rachaad White and who? Exactly. Like Chase Edmonds? Blah. I'm hoping Sean Tucker maybe does something, but they probably could have used another running back in the rotation there to help Rachaad White out. Bucky Irvin can do that. I think he's got pretty solid vision. He's not like the most athletic guy when it comes to being an undersized running back. He kind of like hope for a little bit more speed and whatnot, but he was a monster at Oregon. He was up there in terms of forced missed tackles. So I'm okay with the pick in the 4th round. I think it's pretty solid. And then with their later day 3 picks, to me, it's kind of whatever. I didn't really have draftable grades on either of these guys. I know some people liked Elijah Klein, a guard out of UTEP. I didn't even think he was the best UTEP player in this draft class. Is what it is. You need more interior help. You're taking a shot at essentially probably a developmental guy who probably goes on the practice squad. Kind of depends on the depth. And then Devin Culp feels more like what they got in their tight end 2. I'm losing his name. It's like Clef or Cleef. I can't recall. But where he's more of this like H-back type, right? This like move tight end. Again, didn't have a draftable grade on him or the other Washington tight end, but I don't know, maybe these guys end up making the team. They're late day 3 picks. Kind of is what it is. I'm not going to grade late day 3 picks harshly. All in all, I thought this was a fine class, a good class. It hit up on needs while not necessarily reaching for players or reaching for need, but staying within the value. Like Graham Barton, I had as a back end of the 1st round guy. Chris Braswell, I had in that like mid day 2 range. Tyke Smith and Jalen McMillan were in that like 3rd round range for me. Bucky Irvin, I think I had a 5th round grade on him, but considering what he put on tape, it's like, man, I really want to bet that he can be like this Kyrie Williams type of player, but I just don't think his vision's up to that level. Like Kyrie Williams has elite vision. But it was a good draft class by the Bucs. But let's talk about this coaching staff, because again, you had a big change at OC. Liam Cohen takes over for Dave Canales at OC, and I don't think much is going to change. Even Baker Mayfield's come out and said, hey, yeah, the schemes are fairly similar. I mean, there's going to be, of course, a few tweaks here and there, but like Cohen's not going to be making very dramatic changes. If you're unfamiliar with Cohen, last year he was the OC and the QB's coach for Kentucky. It was kind of weird because in between there, like he was the Rams OC back in 2022, and then the year prior he was also Kentucky's OC once again. Again, quarterback coach there as well. Worked with Will Levis during that time, so kind of weird little stint there, but he's been with the Rams for most of his coaching career. He was a quarterback and wide receiver coach with the Rams prior to going to Kentucky. So what he's going to run, I think, is going to be very reminiscent of kind of the classic Sean McVay, because we saw Sean McVay make some tweaks, start to lean on more power run concepts last year and inside zone. I think we're going to see more of a traditional like wide zone blocking scheme that we were more used to with Sean McVay. I think there will be maybe a bit more play action and a bit more motion compared to what we saw with Dave Canales. So again, not like a dramatic difference in terms of what Canales brought to the table. But I think there's going to be little differences here and there, like I said, mainly in terms of how much motion, how much play action we're going to see. But for the most part, wide zone blocking scheme. Now let's talk about the defense. Let's talk about Todd Bowles, who is the DC here. He was promoted from DC in 2022 to be the head coach after Bruce Arians stepped away. And I mean, it's hard to knock him too much, really. I think he's done a solid job. He's a good defensive mind. He's been a DC for like the better part of his whole career. I mean, if you go and look at it, he had a stint as the Jets head coach, but I mean, he worked under guys like Tony Sparano when he was with the Dolphins, Mike Zimmer when he was with the Cowboys. But I think he's done a good job with his defense since arriving here, because keep in mind, he was the DC under Bruce Arians. What we're going to see is an attacking 3-4. He likes to blitz. He likes to bring pressure. And usually we would see a bit more press man coverage when it comes to Bowles, but we saw a lot more cover 3 last year. But again, I mean, you're seeing a lot of like fire zone, so he's like bringing like 5 guys, 5-6 guys to add to the pressure. So really, you're just having like 3 deep, 3 underneath in terms of your zone coverage. And an interesting fact, just because you typically when you either blitz a lot or you do a lot of stunts. Like we've just seen that with like Dennis Allen, usually with Gus Bradley, like guys that don't blitz, they usually stunt, but guys who blitz a ton, they're typically on the lower end in terms of stunts. That wasn't the case. Like Bowles, he was up there in like, I think the top 5 in terms of how often he used stunts last year. And I really love what he does when it comes to the front 7 and around the line of scrimmage and how he creates that pressure. Because this was a team that did a good job getting pressure, so much so to where I was like, okay, so are the guys on the edge, are they like, can they be really, really good? Or have they just kind of been schemed up really, really well? But like, Bowles is a good defensive minded coach, and I think the defense, I think hopefully they should bounce back in terms of coverage. We'll see, but there's going to be a lot of press regardless. When it comes to his DCs, it's just guys that have been with him for a long time. This is one of the few cases in the league where you have 2 guys labeled as the defensive coordinator. So you got like a passing game coordinator or a run game coordinator. You got Casey Rogers, who was promoted when Bowles became the head coach. He was promoted from the D-line coach to the co-defensive coordinator. And he's just been with Bowles for a long time, since 2005. He was a D-line coach with the Dolphins, with Sparano. He was a D-line coach with the Cowboys, with Zimmer. So he's been with Bowles for a long time, been around Bowles for a hell of a long time. And then you got Larry Foot. That's right, former linebacker. Most notably for the Steelers, did have a stint with the, I think it was the Cardinals, but he was an NFL linebacker for about 13 years. He was a linebackers coach with the Cardinals for a little bit after he retired, but he became a linebackers coach with the Bucs under Bowles. And then, of course, when Bowles got promoted, he got promoted to co-defensive coordinator as well. So again, guys that are Bowles, they're very familiar with Bowles. This is Bowles coming up with the defense. And as you can see down below, I got my grades coaching wise for both the passing offense, the running offense, the passing defense, and the passing offense. And yeah, I'm kind of like in the middle when it comes to these guys. Like Bowles, I'm kind of hoping to see him adapt a little bit more. You could definitely see in the middle part of the year, especially when they went on that, like when they were like 1-6 during a 7-game period, just like his stubbornness not to really change what they were doing. They were allowing a lot of explosive plays in the passing game, and they were just kind of hoping to hit home. And to be fair, because of how often he blitzed and how many people he brought in, I think that kind of benefited more the run game. And then you had, of course, Carlton Davis just kind of getting mollywopped more so. You had Jameel Dean hurt much of the year yet. I mean, I think he still ended up playing like over 800 snaps. So you had like also like Zion McCollum stepping in after, for the most part, just kind of sitting his rookie season, getting his first real taste of playing time in the NFL. So yeah, like there were a lot of things going on there, a lot of learning going on there. But let's talk about the rest of this coaching staff. When it comes to the Buccaneers, let's go ahead, scroll down here, look for some names that we know, we're familiar with. As we got Thaddeus Lewis. You might remember him as a former Duke quarterback. He's the quarterback's coach here. He was the quarterback's coach last year as well. You also have Tom Moore, who's been around the NFL for 100 years. At least it feels that way. He's been around the NFL for a long time. I think I've talked about during this deep dive series, these senior offensive assistant, senior defensive assistant roles are typically given to guys that have been around the league for like 20 plus years, and you just want to get that type of wisdom in your coaching room and just bring as much experience, much wisdom, and that way you could kind of like just spitball ideas. And you just get a lot of good heads in there to come up with your week-to-week game plan. And again, Tom Moore, been around for a hell of a long time. You also have Kevin Ross as the cornerbacks coach. I think this is his... How long has he been around with the squad? I know he was here last year. Can't remember how long he's been around with this team, but we've seen him develop guys well. It's just been very streaky. Like Carlton Davis, very streaky. Jameel Dean, I think he's really good when in, but again, injuries and whatnot. I think we'll see when it comes to McCollum, who's really probably going to be your other starting corner, played the most snaps, I think, among the cornerback room last year. See how he develops him. If you remember, McCollum coming out of Sam Houston State was kind of this, wow, he is a gifted athlete. Can we develop that? So we'll see. We'll see if the fruits of his labor, so to speak, this season. Keith Tandy has been around this team for I think for like the last 5 years or so. But he's a defensive and special teams assistant. He was also a former safety in the NFL. Again, I love players that I remember growing up. And it's like, wow, now they're on coaching staffs. You got to love it. But for the most part, I'm actually pretty unfamiliar with a lot of the names here when it comes to this coaching staff. Just not a coaching staff that I know really, really well. But go ahead, let's talk about this offense. As per usual, you see my grades for each position group over here. Let's start with quarterback Baker Mayfield. He earned another go at this thing. He truly did. He played really well last year. Were there some errant passes? Of course, but he had enough of the big time throws to make up for it. Ended up having a 74% adjusted completion percentage. Keep in mind that takes out drops, that takes out spikes, that takes out throwaways. So it's the truest, analytic we can get when it comes to accuracy. Baker Mayfield played good. He gives you that grittiness. Now, I think in tight games, you're not always going to be able to lean on him. That's why, like, my grade here is a C, which is like middle of the pack. Like, he's in that like top 15 to top 18. Though again, led a really good offense last year when it came to the passing. and that could creep up. I will say I kind of have harsher grades, and this kind of encompasses the whole position group, not just Baker, but also the backup, which Kyle Trask we really know nothing about. We saw him like for a couple of snaps last year, and honestly, it was kind of like, oh, okay. Look, I forgot about that arm, Trask. Okay, let's go. But Baker, while I say, I don't think he can get it done on his own. There'll be some cases where it's like, yeah, down the stretch, like again, that Houston game, I love pointing to it because it was such a great game. Like he won that game and then was let down by the defense or Carlton Davis. I feel like this is a rag on Carlton Davis video, but it's just kind of wild, man. That dude, his whole career, has just either been really good, really bad, or really hurt. There's nowhere in between. But like Baker can win games, but I just don't think having that consistently on his shoulders. I don't know what that looks like in a playoff run. Can he do a playoff run where like they're having tight games like that? I have my doubts, but again, he could silence those doubts this season. I still think he's one of the better. He's definitely among the better half of starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Rachaad White, I like-ish, I guess. I like what he brings as a versatile weapon, what he can do, not just as a running back, but as a pass catcher, probably even more so as a pass catcher. Had almost 600 yards receiving last year. But if you do look at, like, I get it, the yards per attempt aren't great because, well, the offensive line, and particularly the interior, wasn't that good. But you do go look at his yards after contact, 2.63, not that great of a number, only 44 forced missed tackles on almost 300 carries. That's a pretty low number. It's a pretty low in general. And I do think his vision's gotten a bit better. Vision was kind of one of the biggest concerns coming out of the draft when he was coming out of Arizona State there, but we'll see. The problem is there's really not much behind him. There's just not. And we'll talk a bit more about we can talk about the depth at running back right now, right here and now. Here and now. Here we go. Bucky Irvin currently listed as the backup. You are getting someone who I think has fairly solid vision, but not elite, who for an undersized back isn't as athletic as you would like him to be, but he was very good at Oregon. He was very good, so I get going out and getting him. I still have hope in Sean Tucker in terms of what he brings as just muscle, size, and speed. I still have faith in him. I really liked him at Syracuse. Kind of had a down year going into the year he declared, but the year prior he was very, very good. So I would still like to see him a part of this offense in some shape and form. Granted, he really wasn't a part of this offense last year, but he's another guy where the vision's like, don't love it. Chase Edmonds, he's here along for the ride, but the dude got snaps last year. The dude got snaps. The dude got carries. And to be fair, I would say he was moderately productive. He's a good guy to have in the rotation. I couldn't really tell you too much about, was there Raymond Jefferson here? It's a UDFA coming out of Kentucky. I don't remember actually watching him, but I do remember some of his analytics were kind of like, oh, okay, not half bad. DJ Williams out of Arizona. This was the other guy with Michael. Was it Michael Wiley or Marcus Wiley? I can't remember now. Again, the draft feels like it's been forever ago, but someone who's probably going to be on the outside looking in regardless. Let's talk about the other weapons, the pass catchers, if you will. Mike Evans, still hella good. One of the guys where it's like, you know what? Not a lot's open. Where's Mike? He'll go up and he will get it. Yeah, he's that good. He's still a pretty darn good receiver in the NFL. If you include the playoffs, had over 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. He was 54.5% at the contested catch. You like it. You love it. Chris Godwin. I know he occasionally hurt, but like the dude's still hella good. he's still hella good. When healthy, gets open, does his job, does it well. Apparently, he's going to see more snaps in the slot this season, which I think is pretty intriguing, given that Trey Palmer was in the slot. Oh, I mean, he was only in the slot 55.4% of the time. Really, all those slot snaps were going to guys like, well, Palmer, Cade Otton, so your tight end, so a big slot. You had Devin Tompkins in there, who I don't even think is on the roster anymore, actually. But I don't know, man. It's going to be fascinating. Trey Palmer was a rookie last season, had over 400 yards, had 4 tutties. You're kind of hoping what he can do as a vertical target. Also someone who could maybe create after the catch. Had 5 forced missed tackles. That was on 42 catches. So an okay number, but it'll be fascinating. I think this wide receiver room, you at least know you got a really good two-headed monster with Godwin, with Evans, and honestly with Rachaad White as the pass catching back. You go to Cade Otton, who had, I think, a very productive year. He was fine. I don't think he's like a top 10 tight end in the league, but I think he's in that middle ground type of area. Had over 600 yards, 5 tutties. He was, his contested catch rate, 41.2%. That's okay. The drop rate was fine at 6%. Someone who had 6 forced missed tackles. So forced missed tackle every 10 receptions. That's a fine number for a tight end. So he's fine. He's all right. Let's talk about actually some of the depth, I guess. Let's just go ahead and move to the depth at receiver. They bring in Jalen McMillan, who's someone I think could win at all levels of the field, but more in particularly the slot. He was kind of pigeonholed there. I think his snaps in the slot were about 80% over his career. And then you have Rakim Jarrett, who's another one of these guys who can be this like vertical speedster coming out of, I think it was Maryland? Where was his final stop? Because I believe he was a transfer. Okay, regardless, his last year was at Maryland. No, I guess he didn't transfer. I don't know. Again, if you think 2024 NFL draft was long ago for me, 2023 was a lifetime ago. But I'm lucky to remember where these guys came from. But he saw a little bit of time last year, but didn't really get like volume or anything. Again, he was kind of like a 5th option in this offense if he did get onto the field. But you got to imagine he's probably the wide receiver 5 here with maybe an outside shot with Sterling Shepard now on the roster. Someone who is familiar with Baker Mayfield for what they did back at Oklahoma. So I don't know if he ends up just sticking to the roster because of that. But to be fair, there's really nothing behind these guys. There's not. Ryan Miller, I think, was like firm, right? He was more of this like, is he a big slot? Yeah, firm. Is he a big slot or is he a big receiver? Cephas Johnson, couldn't really tell you much about. Like, again, a lot of these guys, I just couldn't really tell you much about them, especially these UDFAs. And I went through like maybe 100 receivers last year during my eval process. So just again, I mean, just names that I'm unfamiliar with. So you're particularly probably looking at these 6 guys in Sterling, Shepard, Jarrett, McMillan, Godwin, Palmer, and Evans. But Shepard feels more like he's a slot player who can play on the outside, but he's a slot player. He's a possession guy. I don't know if they hold on to 6 wide receivers because I kind of feel like he's on the outside looking in unless they want to put Rakim Jarrett on the practice squad. When you go to the tight end room, it's Kieft, who kind of functions as a tight end too. Also, can be like this like move tight end, play H back. So I like what he brings to this roster in that role. Payne Durham, someone I liked out of Purdue, a bit better ball skills than you would expect from someone his size. I say his size like he's extraordinarily big. He's not. He's like prototypical tight end, but I liked him. I liked him coming out of Purdue. So someone who I didn't think he was going to challenge for the starting spot, but I think he can get into that tight end to talk. Devin Colt probably makes the roster because, I mean, the other guys there are like David Wells, Tanner Talua. So Colt probably, I feel like he's more in that like Kieft role. So I doubt he sees much playing time, if any, truly. But again, this is a two-headed beast when it comes to the passing attack, led by Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then you're kind of hoping like, you got Rashad White and Kate Otten who could supplement and be secondary options. And then you're kind of hoping maybe Trey Palmer breaks out. You have Jalen McMillan, who I imagine will be the wide receiver 4 and get some work. And then the offensive line. Well, the one thing that was kind of the Achilles heel, the pass blocking I thought was fairly solid last year. I really did. Where this team suffered was running the freaking football. Truly, like the interior was a problem. Like Robert Hainsey was someone I liked coming out of Notre Dame. I thought he had good versatility. Got his shot at being a starter last year, mainly at center, and he was probably like maybe like the 24th, 25th. He was in that 20s range in terms of like starting centers in the league. So of course you were looking for an upgrade. Graham Barton is that upgrade. Hainsey, I think, still ends up being a very solid depth player for the squad. And when it comes to left guard, I'm gonna give the nod to Opeta over Breedson. I'm not a big Breedson guy. I think he's at best depth, and I really liked what Opeta did in some of his starts for the Eagles. Both are 1-year deals. Breedson's the higher paid guy. We'll see in camp. Cody Mock was a bit... He was everything you thought he was going to be as a rookie. He wasn't good. He just wasn't good. He wasn't ready for NFL play strength. Like, I get it. A lot of people loved him because of the movement skills at the Senior Bowl, but you knew, okay, he needs to get a little bit more play strength, needs to get a better anchor, and needs to maybe be a bit better with just his location, whether it's his hands or out in space. And last year just kind of proved that. Like, the dude gave up 57 pressures as a pass protector, allowed 8 sacks. Not great. You're kind of hoping he takes that next step, that, okay, he took his bumps and his lumps as a rookie, but he was someone who was like, okay, we see a high ceiling floor, a high ceiling 4. So hopefully start seeing him trend in that direction. And then, of course, you got one of the best tackles in the league in Tristan Wirfs. He was phenomenal last year. He was great. Only allowed 24 pressures. The dude was money. Now, Luke Godecki, wow, man, the move back to tackle ends up being like, hello. He was their second best starting offensive lineman last year, which, again, not saying much with how bad the interior was, but he was much improved. Keep in mind, this was someone who was coming out of Central Michigan as a tackle. Then they decided to start him at guard, and oh boy, was it a disaster. Then he moves out to tackle and looked really good. Like, not saying like he was elite, but he was definitely an above average starter for this squad, and you're hoping things just keep trending up. So you feel good about the tackle combo. You look to the inside and you think, and you're hoping Graham Barton's going to be a massive upgrade. You're hoping Opeta or Breedson end up working at least one of those guys, and you're hoping Cody Mock takes that next step up. But again, I have some doubts. Again, this was the worst run blocking unit in the NFL. And when it comes to the depth on the offensive line, Justin Skull's back as your backup tackle. Couldn't tell you much about Brandon Walton. But I mean, I like that Hainsey he's got that versatility to him. So if injury does does happen. Maybe you can move some things around and see how that works. Looks like, I mean, maybe Elijah Klein ends up being a backup, making the roster as a backup guard here. But I like Luke Haggard coming out of Indiana. We'll see what he looks like in camp. Dzanzi, I think Silas was Virginia Tech, and he was a bit of a toolsy prospect. Yeah, he was a bit of a toolsy guy. So I wonder where he's at in his development. So, like, the depth's not terrible. There's definitely worse depth on teams around the league, but it's not like high end. It's definitely probably maybe in that like 12 to 15 range, 12 to 18 range around the league. But like, all in all, I still feel positive about this offense. I do think they're trending in the right direction. Again, my grades do look a bit harsher than probably how I actually feel. We're working on the grading system. This is the first year implementing it. But we'll make some adjustments next year during the deep dive series. Maybe make it a bit more tier based. But because again, these grades are in, where are they in comparison to the rest of the league? And again, maybe more middle of the road guys, the grades come off as a bit more harsh, I suppose. But I don't know. We'll figure out the grading system. I think it's a good trial run. It's a good start. But let's talk about this defense, because I'm very excited to talk about this defense. I truly am. So this is who I have as your defensive starters. And again, when I say starters, these are the guys that I think are going to see the field the most. They're going to be your lead snap getters. And that's a big indication on how good your defense is going to be during the season. And let's start with the defensive line. I got a C- for the pass rush grade. Because again, I mean, you lose your best pass rusher in Shaquille Barrett. And it's fair to question what do you have in guys like Diaby and Joe Tryon? Are these guys, are they legit? Are they legit? Can someone be an edge one here? And I don't really know if that's the case. Like, if I were to make a lean, like make a call, I would say maybe Tryon's your best bet, because athletically very gifted. You could say the same thing about Diaby. I really liked him coming out of Louisville. But if you look at these guys' pass rush grades last season, Tryon, 10.8%. Diaby, 6.7%. That's their win rates. Not good. Not good. But I thought Bulls did a good job of getting these guys in one-on-ones, in true one-on-one situations. And that's kind of where they did their work and did exceptionally well. Like, Tryon's pass rush win rate went up to like 17% in true one-on-ones. You had Diaby go up to like 12.6. So it's like, okay, like there's some potential there, but are either of these guys going to be someone who can do it on their own? I know there's maybe going to be some people be like, well, what about like Elijah Cansey? He had a really solid rookie season, at least as a pass rusher. Wasn't that great as a run defender. But again, how this team attacked the run, because like Vita Vea is like, well, he's a wall of meat, man. He takes up a lot of space. And then you had guys like Levante David, and I mean, even in some cases, who was playing safety, like Ryan Neal, being able to come up and like fill some of those lanes and defend the run really well and adequately. But when it came to Elijah Cansey as a pass rusher, his pass rush win rate last year, 9.5%. That's okay for the interior. That's not bad. 13.9 when it came to like true one-on-ones, but you're not really expecting him to be necessarily put in a lot of one-on-one situations unless you're getting fancy with stunts, which this team did. Vita Vea was good. He's a top 10 interior player in the league, in my opinion. I think he's a bit underrated and people forget about him. 14.1% pass rush win rate, had 39 pressures, 7 sacks. Again, this is for like including the regular season as well. he did a hell of a good job at that. But let's talk about the depth, the guys that are going to be circling in on this defensive line. And I mean, where do we? I guess we start with the rotation and what it's going to be. Anthony Nelson's been around the squad for a hell of a long time. He's typically been kind of their edge two, excuse me, their like rotation edge, that edge 3 that comes in, and he is moderately fine. He is fine, but I think he's a better depth player. That's why you maybe swing on a Chris Braswell. That's why you bring in a Randy Gregory. So I'm kind of interested to see what the rotation will look like, how many people will get involved in that rotation as well. So that is going to be something to look out for. Some of the other interior players they have, or edge players they have, Jose Ramirez, I really liked coming out of, I think it was Eastern Michigan, tested really well, very nimble, especially a guy if you're going to be playing a lot of stunts, having him as a looper goes a long way. But again, buried on the depth chart here. Couldn't tell you much about any of these other cats though, unfortunately. Actually, is this the dude from like that crazy college? Nope, never mind. Different guy. I was thinking of there was some dude out of some, I forgot the college name, it was wacky. There were reports he had this insane pro day. But then the actual numbers came out and it was like, oh, okay, still good, but not these ludicrous numbers people were reporting. Regardless, let's talk about the interior. Gray Gaines is a very good player here in the rotation. Had 12 pressures, 2 sacks last season. I think he's a just another guy that can eat space for you. You also have Mike Green here. Eric Banks, couldn't tell you much about. Judge Culpepper was kind of one of my sleepers, late round sleepers in this class. He's more to the akin of a little undersized, but he's around like that 300 range. Plays with a big motor. I know people look and see like, oh, well, he's coming out of Toledo. He's kind of a long shot, but he was recruited by Penn State. So this is someone that has a bit of a pedigree to him. I think his dad actually played in the NFL. Was it for the Bucs too? Brad Culpepper? I can't remember. That's before my time. Not necessarily before my time, but I was a child in the 90s. Like a very young child. Like we're talking single digits when it comes to my age. Back in the 90s. You have Logan Hall, never really developed. Probably gonna, after his contract's up, they're probably gonna just part ways with him. Just again, hasn't really done anything, hasn't really been beneficial for this team, unfortunately. Just ends up being like a swing and a miss. I think he was like the first pick in the second round of 2022. William Golston, he's a good depth guy. Been around the squad for feels like 2 decades now. CJ Brewer couldn't tell you much about, but you do have Ernest Brown. I think this was Northwestern. He was a bit of a tweener, but a bigger tweener because he was kind of playing a 5-tech, sometimes edge for Northwestern. He's at 300 pounds. It's great. I think when he came out, he was around that 290, 294 range. But we got to talk about the linebacker room. Well, first off, Levante David, still great, still phenomenal. He deserves more love. He was really good as a blitzer as well. I mean, if just looking at his number last year, 22 pressures, 6 sacks, 70 defensive stops. Those are stops resulting in no gain or a negative loss. Also in coverage for pass breakups. He's kind of that minimal gain guy where he might allow a receiver to catch it, but like underneath, but those 4 to 6 yards are going to be the only 4 to 6 yards that they get. And then the question is, who's going to be starting next to him? I imagine it's going to be KJ Britt, who's kind of a thumper. Coming out of Auburn, he played 252 snaps, but he played decently last season. I'm kind of rooting for, let's go back to the depth here. I'm rooting for Servassier Dennis. Out of Pittsburgh. He was a rookie last year. Saw not a lot, like 100 snaps maybe last season, but for a undersized linebacker, he's in that like 220 range. They got him up to 230? No shot. Oh, I'm excited. Really good at Pitt. Really good. So a guy that can move and move really well. I'm holding out hope that maybe he can win that starting job next to Levante David. I'm kind of holding out hope for that. Couldn't really tell you much about some of the other guys that they have here. Kalen DeLoche was a bit of a, not undersized, but a short linebacker out of Florida State. 5'11", well, yeah, undersized. Never mind, thinking of the other guy, but yeah, no, totally undersized at 212 pounds. Florida State had some weird linebackers. Like the other one that came out was like 5'10", 5'9". But I think he was around like 225, 230. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, unfortunately. Let's see who this V Jones is. I don't know why this sounds familiar. Nope, couldn't tell you much about him. So I'm not going to talk out of ignorance. But again, I'm really shooting for Dennis to get that starting linebacker spot. But I'm gonna go ahead with Kenny Britt, KJ Britt, who's been around longer, played more snaps last season. And then the secondary currently has a C+ grade. Listen, there were some struggles in the secondary. Carlton Davis was kind of a big problem with that. He's now moved on, traded. And now they're kind of able to get off of that contract. Jamil Dean, I'm hoping he can stay healthy. He was still 6th on the team in snaps. He's a hella good. People sleep on how good he is. I think he's one of the more underrated guys in the league. While last year, I think the defense, at least the coverage scheme, lent itself to a lot like to inflate reception rates on some of these corners. And they were kind of asked just kind of minimize. It was kind of a, like, we're going to bring pressure and hopefully get home. But if we don't, we kind of want to bend, don't break. But this team kind of broke a lot, unfortunately. But with Dean, he had 7 pass breakups last season. Ended up allowing 52 receptions for 65 yards and 5 tutties. That was actually on par with Carlton Davis, which is kind of shocking given Carlton Davis allowed 3 touchdowns in one game, but also Carlton Davis was more heavily targeted, allowed more yards as well. But Jamil Dean's one of my favorite corners in the league. Man, dude's just built well. Next to him is going to be Zion McCullin, who stepped up last year, and I thought he was better than I expected. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Much better than I expected. Allowed a completion rate of 60.2%. Allowed 3 tutties. Had 8 pass breakups, though. So I'm kind of excited to see more. He's going to get his shot here to start or be a starter for the squad. Because, I mean, if you look at next guy up, it's probably Bryce Hall. And I mean, I want to see Bryce Hall just get involved. Again, I'm a big fan of Bryce Hall. When it comes to the slot, I imagine it's going to be Christian Eisen, Zine, who was the starter coming out of camp, being a UDFA, a rookie. It was kind of wild. And he started the year well, had a bit of a slump when they were having their losing streak, but I thought he finished the year relatively strong. Again, when you're in the slot, you're typically going to allow a higher completion rate than you would on the outside. But even then, 80% is a hell of a high number for him. Had 2 interceptions, did allow 4 touchdowns. Maybe you see a bit of a bump in year 2 of him just being the guy. But I got to imagine Tyke Smith, Tavier Thomas are going to be there if he ends up not playing well. Like, I imagine that those are the next guys up. And maybe they ride a hot hand in the slot. Maybe they play a lot more dime next year so that they can have 2 of these guys on the field. Whether that's the combination of like Azine and Smith, Smith and Thomas, Zine and Thomas. We shall see. At safety, haven't even talked about Antoine Winfield Jr. In the video yet. I think because my last deep dive video was on the Falcons. So if you want to check out your divisional rivals, check that out here. But I said Jesse Bates was probably the best safety in the NFL. It's probably Winfield. Those are the top two safeties in the NFL. Antoine Winfield's hella good. Such a playmaker. Whether it's him as a blitzer, dude had 20 pressures, 6 sacks. Hello. That's a great number. He had 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups. The dude was just good. He was everywhere. You'll love it. You'll love it. One of the best safeties in the NFL. Again, it's really between him and Jesse Bates. Next to him will be Jordan Whitehead, who was Josh Allen's best friend in the season opener. And they were playing against one another. But I thought he played relatively all right. Did allow some touchdowns here and there. But he's coming in as someone you're familiar with to hopefully just kind of solidify what you have in the secondary. Bring some consistency. But I am a bit curious if like a Tyke Smith. Maybe are they looking at Tyke Smith? Like, okay. Well, we got Whitehead here, but we kind of want Smith to be that guy, be that box defender. It will be fascinating. It will be interesting, most definitely. But let's take a look at the depth in that secondary. As I already kind of talked about, like you got Bryce Hall there. Josh Haynes was someone they picked up out of Kansas State, who I believe can work inside and out, but given his size, good size, probably going to remain there on the outside. Some of the, I imagine there's a good shot Smith and Thomas make this squad because it's not like there's anything crazy in terms of the depth. You got Tyreek Funderburk, who was at Appalachian State, who I thought was I didn't have a draftable grade, but I had him as a priority UDFA that could work probably inside and out, which is Appalachian State. Typically those corners are they're undersized and you're like, okay, they got ball skills, but they're probably a slot in the NFL. If you remember Sean Jolly, forgot where he's at right now, but yeah, I mean, maybe he's got an outside shot making the squad. I feel like Thomason, Funderburk probably are those guys. And then at safety, Kayvon Merriweather, who was just a very good, disciplined safety coming out of Iowa. But for the most part, he's been a special teamer thus far for this squad. Did see, I think, about over 150 snaps last year. Wasn't anything special. I think he's really just going to be a special teamer. And then you're going to have probably a battle here between a couple of UDFAs, unless, again, Tyke Smith. And I think this is probably going to be Tyke Smith, and then Thomas moves up in this role. So I truly believe Tyke Smith ends up being their fourth safety, but potentially starting slot or a dime player for them. Because you're going to have potentially you have 2 UDFAs in Marcus Banks and Rashad Wisdom, who I really liked. Had kind of a down year coming off the injury there at UTSA, but he's a real fun box safety who kind of has a nose for the football. Marcus Banks, I think, was Mississippi State. I can't remember too much about him, though. So maybe I'm giving the nod to Wisdom there. Also, sick name, Rashad Wisdom. I remember he ended up making my list, I think, prior to the 2022 season during my summer scouting. And then he unfortunately had the injury in 2022. I think last year was a bit up and down for him at UTSA, but that is your defense. Maybe I'm a bit more harsh when it comes to the defense. I gave them an overall C+. I think they're going to be about middle of the league. They're going to be very solid as run defenders, but I have question marks when it comes to the guys in coverage. I have question marks when it comes to who's going to be stepping up as a pass rusher for the squad. I think those are all fair questions, but I do think at the very least this is probably going to be a middle of the league type of defense, and they're going to be able to keep the offense in games. Because keep in mind, man, during that 4-game losing streak, going 1-6 during a 7-game stretch, like what 4 of those were by 1 score. Like in another one where they lost by multiple, like 2 scores, they were in that game late. Trying to remember which one was. I don't think it was the maybe it was the San Francisco game. Nonetheless, let's go ahead. Let's predict how they'll do in 2024. When it comes to their strength of schedule, I have the Bucs having the 13th easiest schedule in the NFL, so it's more middle of the league. Let's go ahead. Let's project the potential ceiling for this squad. They'll open the year at home against the Commanders. That's a winnable game. You got to travel back to Detroit where you lost that divisional round. I think that's going to be a tough game, but I mean, games against the Broncos. You get the Eagles at home. You beat them in the wild card round last year. You were at home, so hey, let's say you win that game. I think you're probably going to split with teams like the Falcons and the Saints. Ravens, I mean, you get the Ravens at home. That's nice. That's a potential victory. Chiefs at Arrowhead, a little bit tougher. You have to face the Niners prior to your bye. I mean, it's a home game, but they're coming off their bye, so that's probably more of a low win probability. Coming out of the bye, though, you get the Giants. I think you could probably sweep the Panthers again. We're assuming the ceiling for the Bucs. I could see wins against the Raiders, the Chargers. Cowboys is going to be interesting late in the year. Well, let's give them wins right here. What does that give us? That gives us a ceiling of 11. And I mean, I think it'd be fair to potentially give them a 12th win somewhere here. Maybe the Cowboys. So yeah, let's say 12 wins is the ceiling for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But again, that's assuming everything goes perfectly. Not a lot of injuries. The defense, especially the coverage, ends up trending in the right direction. The interior offensive line's not as much of a problem. Baker Mayfield, honestly, if he just rinse and repeats like what he did last year, you're still going to be dealing with probably a top 10 to 12 passing game. So I think 12 wins is fair. As far as floor, probably in that 7 to 8 win range. Assuming maybe more injuries happen. Keep in mind, this team was good last year and they were 9-8. And I mean, they did that with like the 15th easiest schedule. So the 9th easiest schedule. So technically your schedule this year will be harder by a little. But I ended up settling on 10-7. I think that's fair. I think they're going to be competing with the Falcons for the division crown. I think the Saints are there, but again, I think the Saints are a bit more unpredictable than the Bucs, and I'm kind of gonna give the edge to the Bucs winning the South, but I do think it'll be a toss-up between them and the Falcons. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you want to see what I have to say about your division rival Atlanta Falcons, you can check out that video down here, or you can check out some of my college football 25 content. I just started a dynasty with Old Dominion. I got Coach Seymour Butts. That's right, haha, hee hee. You can check that one out right here as well. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.